China's rehearsals could potentially always be a rehearsal for an attack. The rehearsals, the exercises, the campaigns we're doing in and around the first island chain are not meant to be the precursor to an attack. We're here to deter. We're here to show strength with our allies, and that includes ensuring that in every possible way American force is projected forward. So we don't want to see a conflict at all.
The U.S. is reinforcing its Indo-Pacific presence, but seeks to avoid conflict with China. U.S. forces are expanding in the first island chain as tensions with China escalate. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, during a visit to Hawaii, said that U.S. drills near Taiwan are not a prelude to war. He echoed Admiral Samuel Paparo's warning, who leads the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, that China may be rehearsing an attack on Taiwan. Despite military posturing, Hegseth insisted the U.S. remains committed to peace and deterrence. The new Trump administration's defense strategy was outlined by Hegseth as a combination of placing primacy on American interests.
We are doing everything we can to deter conflict with the Communist Chinese, who we don't seek conflict with at all. But we will stand strong in deterrence and will posture troops forward. That's why we're going out to Guam and to see our friends in Japan and the Philippines. We're posturing forward, talking and meeting with commanders who have the capabilities that understand the AOR, talking to friends and allies, and in that, it doesn't get any better than watching troops in action. China's rehearsals could potentially always be a rehearsal for an attack. The rehearsals, the exercises, the campaigns we're doing in and around the first island chain are not meant to be the precursor to an attack. We're here to deter. We're here to show strength with our allies, and that includes ensuring that in every possible way American force is projected forward. So we don't want to see a conflict at all. Nobody's texting more plans. I know exactly what I'm doing, exactly what we're directing, and I'm really proud of what we accomplished, the successful missions that night and going forward.
Let's just, the setting in which you testified, 2 Chinese companies operate the 2 huge ports on both ends of the Panama Canal. And the concession for these ports were extended in 2021 for a 25-year period without any bidding. Is that correct? Okay, so it was clearly a sweetheart deal, correct?
According to the press releases, the company paid back taxes of $150 million.
And the Panama Deputy Attorney General has now objected to that. That's my understanding. Is that correct?
The comptroller of the country has asked for an audit of.
But someone objected to it when it was going on.
A lot of people objected to it.
So Chinese Communist Party officials are known to bribe other officials in countries all around the world. We know that. They do it all the time. No offense to Panama, but they don't have the greatest reputation of having officials who aren't on the take. So is there any evidence that the Chinese bribed people for this great concession? And if so, Professor, would that be a violation of the treaty? Let's assume we find evidence that Chinese Communist Party officials bribed Panama officials for this sweetheart deal. Would that be and I think it's probably likely because the Chinese do this everywhere. Would that be a violation of this treaty?
So in itself, that would not be a violation. What would be a violation is actual threats to the operation of the canal. Okay. However, to the extent that the Chinese government was involved in procuring these contracts, it provides sort of additional support for the notion that these companies are serving some kind of governmental interest. So it wouldn't be a violation itself, but it would be circumstantial evidence to support it.
Let me get to the issue of threats. Let's assume the PRC, the PLA, invaded Taiwan or invaded the Philippines or went to war somewhere in the South China Sea. And we were surging our Navy to the Indo-Pacific through the Panama Canal. Are the companies now on controlling both sides of the Panama Canal, the Chinese companies, subject to the PRC's national security laws that mandate cooperation with the military, with state intelligence agencies? Does anyone know that? Professor,
They're
you know
subject
that?
all the time.
You
Yeah,
know
they're
that?
subject to those laws all the time by virtue of being Hong Kong companies. And they face, of course, consequences for not complying with the wishes of the Chinese
So
government. And one of the arguments,
wouldn't that be a violation of the treaty? And isn't that a huge risk to us right now that the Chinese, the
so that is a
PLA,
threat to the neutrality.
they invaded Taiwan, invaded the Philippines, they could go to these two companies saying, hey, shut it down, make it hard, sink a ship in the canal. And wouldn't they be obligated to do that under Chinese law if they were ordered to by the PLA or the CCP?
I don't know if they'd be obligated, but certainly the People's Republic of China would have many tools of leverage and pressure on these companies. That's why the treaty specifically says that we can act not just to end actual obstructions to the canal. We don't have to wait until the canal is closed by hostile military action. That would be a suicide pact. That would be catastrophic for us. But rather that we can respond at the inchoate, incipient level to threats. And then this is up to the president to determine whether this is significantly robust to constitute
So,
an imminent
Professor,
threat.
aren't we kind of walking up to the idea of a suicide pact because we got two big Chinese companies on both ends of the Panama Canal who, if there's a war in Indo-Pacific, Taiwan that involves us and China, these companies would be obligated to do the bidding of the Chinese Communist Party and PLA? I mean, aren't we kind of walking up to a very significant national security threat already?
Yeah, certainly there's a threat, and I think what makes the action of the Chinese government so difficult to respond to, but important to respond to, is that they conceal this in sort of levels of gray, right, without direct control.
Well, let me ask you on that topic, as my last question, Professor. Let's assume that we find out, and again, it wouldn't be surprising, I think you can almost assume it, that these two companies have Chinese spies or military officials within the ranks of the employees of the companies. Let's assume we found that out. Somehow that becomes public. But I don't think it's a big assumption. It's probably true right now. So you have spies and military personnel within the ranks of these two companies that are controlling both ends of the Panama Canal. For you, Professor and Chairman Sola, wouldn't that be a blatant violation of Article 5 of the Neutrality Treaty, if that were true?
Yeah.
It probably is true.
Yes. I do think that it would be. I do think it would be a clear violation, as Dean Rusk, former Secretary of State Dean Rusk, said at the ratification hearings. Informal forces can violate Article 5 as well as formal forces.
And
So
Chairman
clearly,
Sola, do you agree with
assumption
that?
would be a
And
violation.
is there any evidence of Chinese spies or other nefarious Chinese actors embedded in these companies?
Senator, we have no information of that.
Okay.
That's not under the purview of the federal.
But you agree that would be a violation of Article 5 of the Neutrality Treaty?
I do.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.